Fred claimed that he was aboard the USS Antietam, that a similar degaussing experiment happened to him numerous times, and it was the same thing that happened in 1943 with the Eldridge, and he claimed that he had additional information to prove that the Philadelphia experiment was actually valid.
You are listening to Terra Signals, presented by Normal Paranormal. I am your host, Justin Bamforth. For those of you unfamiliar with Maxim Furek's work, he considers himself an academic and an avid student of the paranormal. His eclectic background includes aspects of psychology, addictions, and raw journalism. Maxim has a master's degree in communications from Bloomsburg University and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Aquinas College. He has written numerous rock biographies and paranormal-themed books, including Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, and Shepton, the Myth, Miracle, and Music. Now, Maxim has been featured on numerous podcasts, including Australia's Mysterious Universe, Exploring the Bizarre with the legendary late Timothy Green Beckley, and Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader. He contributes articles to Fate Magazine, Paranormal Underground, and of course, my site, Normal Paranormal. But tonight, he returns to the show to discuss a mysterious event that will soon be approaching its 80th anniversary, the Philadelphia Experiment, as well as his upcoming book, The Flying Saucer Esoteric, History's Most Amazing UFO Events. Maxim, my friend, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Thanks for having me again on Terra Signals, and thank you so much for acknowledging and recognizing the Philadelphia Experiment. You know, I think more ufologists and more paranormal researchers need to go down this road. So thanks so much, and hopefully we can have a nice discussion about the Philadelphia Experiment that took place, as you said, 80 years ago, 1943.
Wow, that is quite some time ago, I tell you. But in your book, right, Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, you go into various paranormal phenomena, including this story about the Philadelphia Experiment. Now, given its complexity involving time travel, potential murder, government cover-ups, what drew you to include this in your book?
Well, one of the things is, my Coal Region Hoodoo is Pennsylvania-centric. So if you go with the premise that art imitates life. I talked about Night of the Living Dead and The Blob. I mean, motion pictures that were created and here in Pennsylvania. But with the Philadelphia Experiment, that was one that I just thought, first of all, a couple of things. One, I had a personal connection with that. I knew an individual who had personal information about the Philadelphia Experiment. And I include that in my book. But also, it was something that with the movie Oppenheimer, with all of the attention to the Manhattan Project and all of the things that were happening during World War II, the Philadelphia Experiment fits in with that. Part and parcel. I mean, it belongs in that whole genre of Oppenheimer and atomic bombs and nuclear energy and everything else. So it's just a lot of exciting things happened, during the 1940s, just in preparation for winning this war. And the Philadelphia Experiment fits into that.
A lot of listeners are familiar with the Philadelphia Experiment because of the extreme speculation and even these wild conspiracy theories. But for those who may not be familiar with the story, what are some of the key events and elements that make it such a compelling topic?
Well, it's compelling because part of it was true. I mean, there's no denying that. But the mythology, the legend is this, that in 1943, the USS Eldridge, a destroyer, it was a destroyer escort, and its crew were made invisible. They were rendered invisible and then teleported from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. There might have been some time travel, a time delay there, but then they came back, and on the way back on the return trip, that's where, according to the legend, the bad things happened. And they talked about the ship, the crew suffering horrible physiological events. And for your listeners that have seen some of the 3 motion pictures on the Philadelphia experiment, but there was one that, I mean, it's just like it just etched into our minds. And this is where the members of the several members of the Eldridge were partially embedded in the steel deck. They were still alive, but they were just embedded there, and that was just such a graphic and just horrible visual. And I think more than anything else, people remember that. But according to the story, when the ship was re-teleported back to Philadelphia, all kinds of bad things happened, including several people died. And that's where the story kind of ended, and again, it's very difficult to get any kind of information because the government contends to this day that it never happened, that the technology never was developed, and all this other stuff. So it's very much we've heard the same thing with Kecksburg, the Kecksburg UFO, the Roswell, and everything else. Just government denial and also misinformation. So. And certainly with this story, we had, I think, government disinformation. There were so many other players that got involved in the Philadelphia experiment. But
what were they trying to experiment with? I mean, what was the goal with this whole thing?
Okay, well, during World War II, the Allied shipping, the military transports and military ships were going across the Atlantic, and the Germans had laid these underwater mines. Now, what would happen is the ship would go over the mines, and the magnetic field, and it was measured in Gausses. So the magnetic field would trigger the bomb and blow up the ships. So there was a technique called degaussing, and I think it was developed in Canada, but they would wrap coils around these ships, and they would electrify them, and that electricity would nullify the gauss. So they would degauss these ships, and so they would become invisible, not to radar and not to the human eye, but they would become invisible to those bombs, those undersea bombs. So this was a very effective tactic that they used. It actually happened. According to the theory, according to the UFO researchers and paranormal researchers, what happened was in 1943, it was an experiment where they tried to have additional electricity, and this experiment went sideways. It went wrong, and rather than just degaussing the Eldridge, it was actually teleported. So that's the story, and we have numerous people that came forward to say, yes, it actually happened, and I was involved. So,
wow, that is amazing. I mean, how did this story initially come out?
Well, there was a guy named Carl Allen, aka Carlos Allende. And what he did was he was from New Kensington, Pennsylvania, but what he did was he sent a bunch of letters to Dr. Morris Jessup, and Jessup had written a book about the case for the UFO. And what Allen did from New Kensington, he took copies of the case for the UFO, and he had these annotations. It was different colored markers. It looked like there were 3 or 4 different people that were adding this information. But he claimed, Carl Allen claimed that he had personal information about the Philadelphia experiment. In 1956, he sent over 50 handwritten letters to Morris Jessup. He claimed that he knew about Einstein's unified field theory. And of course, with that was Einstein's attempt to merge gravity and the electromagnetism into one field. The world, scientists have been looking for anti-gravity devices. I mean, this would just change, the game plan. This would change the world if they could do that. But Allen claimed that he had information about this unified field theory. And he sent that information not only to Morris Jessup, but he sent a package to the United States Office of Naval Research. And it was a copy of Jessup's book, with the same annotations, and he sent it there and with the heading "Happy Easter." And that got the Office of Naval Research involved in this, and so they called Jessup into the office, and they wanted to know about this. Again, this was uh, during the war years, and they wanted to know if there was anything out there that might have been might help us win the war, might contribute to our technology, etc. So Carl Allen from New Kensington, Pennsylvania, just entered the picture, and brought Morris Jessup and the Naval Department, Naval Office of the Naval Research together, and so it just it added to that mystique.
Interesting. Now, this Carl Allen, can he be trusted? I mean, does anybody know his story?
Well, his story was that he said he was a merchant marine, and he was aboard the USS Andrew Furseth, and he claimed that he saw the Philadelphia experiment in 1943. He said he was aboard this, he was a merchant marine, and he actually witnessed that. So not only did he have information about the unified field theory, technical scientific information, but also he claims that he personally was there in Philadelphia in 1943 when this happened. So, and he played a large part in, I think it was William Moore and Charles Berlitz's book on the Philadelphia experiment. So Carl Allen, he called himself Carlos Miguel Allende. He changed his name. I'm not exactly sure why. They said that he was a charismatic drifter. He was from New Kensington, that he was of a gypsy extraction, maybe Romanian, and he was like I said, in Western Pennsylvania. So just an interesting individual.
Huh. Yeah, that is interesting. Were there any other individuals who were on board the ship who were part of the experiment who then talked about this like later?
Yeah, there were. As a matter of fact, Al Bielak was one of them, and
Yeah, I remember when Al Bielek he started talking about this, and he was making his rounds on like shows like Coast to Coast, talking with Art Bell about this
yeah,
in
he,
in
he
the 90s, right?
yeah, around 1995, yeah, he started to he appear at some of these conferences, and he said that he was aboard the Eldridge. Now, he claimed that he was a retired electrical engineer. He said that he was aboard the Eldridge with his brother Duncan Belak, and Al said that his job was to throw the on switch. So this switch would go and turn on the generators, these massive generators that would produce the electromagnetic fields, the degaussing thing. So Bielek said that when he did that in 1943, the ship became unstuck and just horrible things started to happen. So him and his brother, and this is where the story gets really whacked out, but he claims him and his brother jumped into the water. And here's a quote from Al at one of his lectures. He said, quote, "We expected to hit the water in the bay and swim ashore, but no water. We never hit it. We kept falling and falling for quite a period of time. And then," he said, that him and his brother Duncan were transported 194 years into the future. And he was in 2137, and he was being treated for intense radiation poisoning in a hospital room 194 years into the future.
That's a bold claim.
It's a bizarre claim. Um, he started to make the rounds with another individual, Phil Schneider, but Belak said that while he was there in 2137, there were banks of television sets with all these programs, and he said that he heard things, he learned things, shocking news about the world and about America. And he said that because he was there in the future, he was privy to this shocking news, this information.
How did he claim to then get back to his current timeline?
Okay, so the shocking news that Al Belak said that he heard when he was in the future, he said that with these banks of TV sets that lined the room, he said that they talked about climate change. These programs said that the climate change had significantly altered the geography of the United States. For example, the water level had risen around Florida so that the only landmass left was the Panhandle, which is in the upper western part of the state. He said that Atlanta, Georgia was now only 3 miles from the ocean. He said the Mississippi River had become an inland waterway. The Great Lakes had merged into one massive body of water. So when he was there in the future, he claimed that he had learned all of this information, this like really bizarre stuff that would happen in the future, uh, to the United States
Jeez.
in particular.
Well, but how did he get back from the future into the current timeline that he disappeared from?
So he time traveled to 2137, where he was there for 6 months and treated for that radiation poison, and then he time traveled or teleported back to Philadelphia, and he claimed that the officials told him, since him and his brothers were the only ones alive, the only ones who had survived. He claimed that uh, the effects of the time travel were unexpected, and what they did was they then sent him to the Montauk Project, which was in Long Island, New York, and then the theory, the conspiracy theory, the narrative of the Philadelphia experiment just got larger and larger, and it went into other areas. And I'll say this: if in fact we just take a look at the Philadelphia experiment before Al Bielak entered it, you have a story about World War II experimentation. With degaussing, a story about an experiment that went wrong, that people were injured, and also that there was a government cover-up. And that in itself sort of makes sense to me. I mean, all of that has all the right parts. But with Al Bielak, he starts talking about time travel into the future, and not only being connected with the Philadelphia experiment, but now also the Montauk Project and time travel and just a whole lot of other bizarre things. And, he took it from, I don't know, he took it into another realm. And I don't know how many people, when he was making the rounds, how many people actually believed him, but a lot of his narrative is really just unbelievable. It's just like, it's hard to believe that, all of this happened just to one individual.
Was there any mention of Al Bielek in the original letters from Carl Allen to Jessup? Did he make any mention of this?
I don't believe there were. No, what Carl Allen was talking to, he was talking about Einstein's unified field theory, anti-gravity machines, that possibility. He was talking about Jessup's book on UFOs. And so basically, what Carl Allen was doing, he was sort of bouncing off of what Jessup had already written. And again, that book became infamous because the Navy Department of Research was sent the book, Jessup's book by Carl Allen, with all these annotations, and they wanted to get to the bottom of this. They wanted to know what was going on. So no, Al Bielak was not mentioned in Philadelphia experiment. As far as I know, it wasn't mentioned by Carl Allen. And my contact was Fred Tracy, and Fred never said anything about Belak. So I'm just questioning his validity and some of his claims.
Yeah, let's get into your journey to where you interviewed Fred Tracy shortly before his passing. He lived in Derry, New Hampshire.
Right.
And how did you get in touch with him?
Well, that's a pretty interesting story. A number of the stories in Co-Region Hoodoo, are personal to me. My cousin Jim Furek was friends with Fred Tracy. They were both in the military, and Jim was living up in Derry, New Hampshire for a while before he came back to Pennsylvania. So Jim told me about this guy up in Derry that knew about the Philadelphia experiment. So, I was curious. So he gave me Fred's phone number, and I called him up and talked to him several times. And I thought, I want to go up there and interview him. So I drove up to Derry for a weekend and interviewed him, a number of times. And Fred claimed that he was aboard the USS Antietam, that a similar degaussing experiment happened to him numerous times, and it was the same thing that happened in 1943 with the Eldridge, and he claimed that he had additional information to prove that the Philadelphia experiment was actually valid.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So he claimed so Fred Tracy's telling you that a similar experiment took place, similar to the Philadelphia experiment, but it was on the ship he was part of called the USS Antietam.
Yeah, it was CV-36. Yeah, it was an aircraft carrier, and they did the same thing. They just had massive amounts of electricity. His took place. The first one took place in Annapolis, Maryland, and this was in '45. But the Antietam was escorted upriver, and there was a massive power station. He claimed there was 250 feet wide. It was 500 feet long, and he said that for several days, the Antietam was bombarded with these electricity charges. He said for 3 days. And he said it was time enough to penetrate the ship's 8-inch thick steel hull. So he claimed that he became ill from that he had to use liquid oxygen later on. And just a whole lot of things happened to him. And he was 60 years old when I interviewed him, but he looked a lot older. He looked like he was really might have had the effects of some sort of radiation poisoning.
Holy moly. What else did he explain, like any of these time travel things, or any of the did he witness any of the same effects that took place on the USS Eldridge?
Yeah, he did experience the same things that they did on the Eldridge. The second time that he experienced the degaussing procedure was he was in the Yellow Sea, and he said that there was something like over 1,340,000 watts of electricity bombarded his mates for 3 days, and he said this was because they had numerous sea mines, and so that the generators operated 24 hours a day during this Yellow Sea procedure. So that was, an actual experiments that he was involved in. But what he said something about Admiral Forrestal that probably was the most profound, and for me at least, was the most dramatic. When he talked about Forrestal's report.
Um, yeah, all right. So before we get into that, I just want to make sure that Fred Tracy is who he claims to be. You verified his what that he was part of the military and that he was on board this USS Antietam.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Fred sent me, we corresponded for the longest time, and he sent me numerous documents that he had sent to the military. I mean, stuff that was, typewritten and printed. I mean, just a lot of good documentation. Uh, and it's too bad that his story wasn't part of the Philadelphia Experiment, the novel, because it deserves to be there. And he tells the story from his perspective. And again, he was involved in degaussing experimentation, and then he was one of the individuals that was there when the report from Admiral Forrestal was read, which was probably, I think, the most profound, revelation. I think that he told me.
And you're talking about Admiral Forrestal. Is this the James Forrestal that we hear in a lot of the UFO lore?
Yeah, Navy Admiral James Vincent Forrestal. He's been connected to uh, MJ-12. He's supposed to have been a member of that that group that again the military says that never happened. But according to ufologists, MJ-12 was a secret committee that President Truman put together to retrieve UFOs, flying saucers, and in particular the Roswell craft. But with Fred Tracy, he said that around 1945, because of the widespread rumors and because of low morale, and Forrestal was the Secretary of the Navy at the time, but he issued a directive clarifying the allegations of the Eldridge. He said this crew, Fred Tracy said that the crew was sworn to secrecy. They were repeatedly warned that it would be an act of treason to reveal the directive's contents. So the memo was read to them, to Fred Tracy's group aboard the Antietam, during the final days of World War II. Fred thought it might have been somewhere in May of 1945. I believe the war ended in June, but it was in May, maybe May 8th to May 19th, he thought. But Fred said, and this is in Fred's words, he said that Forrestal acknowledged that the Eldridge's degaussing operation had gone wrong, and according to Forrestal's directive, quote, it was then decided to stop the degaussing operation and see what was wrong. The ship could not be seen, although all the electrical cables would still be in a coil position as if being supported. The boat was not there, nor was any member of its crew present. At the Navy Yard, a mist appeared and grew heavy. Finally, the ship reappeared. When the ship was boarded, severe damage was found onto the ship and terrible effects on the crew. So again, this was the directive that was read to Fred Tracy and his crewmates on the USS Antietam, an aircraft carrier, and it was written by Secretary of the Navy Admiral James Forrestal. And your listeners probably know that Admiral Forrestal came to an untimely end. And, some ufologists think that he was murdered, but what happened was he was being treated for a mental illness in Bethesda, at the Bethesda Hospital. And he was suicidal, he was depressed, and yet they put him on the 16th floor, they said for observation, but he jumped out of the hospital 16 floors to his death. Again, another suicide, again, many people, many other ufologists claim that, it wasn't a suicide, that it was actually like a murder. And there's been numerous books, that reference that. So it's just amazing when even Jessup, there's another one, Jessup supposedly was going to go and reveal what he had found out about anti-gravity craft, anti-gravity propulsion. He was supposed to reveal that, but the day before, he allegedly committed suicide in a parking lot in Miami, Florida. That he put a hose from his exhaust into the car and committed suicide that way. Again, it seems very mysterious, that he would commit suicide because he had so much. I mean, he was just anticipating, this revelation. He was going to tell his one friend what he had discovered. So it was just really curious that he would choose that time to commit suicide. So a lot of people don't believe it. It's when you follow this Philadelphia experiment, I mean, there's and the variations of it. There's a number of people that died, either mysterious deaths or blatant homicide. So it's just the story is bigger than what Moore and Berlitz wrote about in their Philadelphia experiment book.
Wow. All right. So let's unpack some of this this larger information with documents and classified and hopefully unclassified. I mean, has any of this been declassified from our government?
Well, what happened was I wrote a letter to the Department of the Navy, and I got a response from Richard A. von Donhoff, and this is from the National Archives and Records Administration. So a while back, I was, interviewing Fred Tracy. I was talking to Stanton Friedman. I corresponded with William Moore. A number of the people that were involved in the Philadelphia experiment. But I did contact Richard A. von Donhoff. He responded to me, and here's what he said. This is his quote. And again, I'm I take this with a grain of salt, but he said, quote, as far as the Department of the Navy can determine, the fictitious story of the destroyer, USS Eldridge, from the Delaware River off the League Island Naval Yard to Hampton Roads back in 1943 began as a practical joke among staff members of the Naval Research Laboratory here in Washington. The humorous commentary on a theoretical paper on electromagnetism got out of hand and soon achieved the status of fact and legend. So that's what they sent me. But, the whole document that he sent me is peppered with the fictitious story, a practical joke, the humorous commentary. I mean, this is just so biased and one-sided. And, again, very few of us hold, the government, attribute a whole lot of validity to the government when they talk about, anything pertaining to parapsychology or experimentations or UAPs. So this is just another example of that. But but I still have a copy of that, and I believe that letter from the National Archives there's a copy of that reproduced in my book, Co-Region Hoodoo. So, your readers could read that for themselves. But again, I take it with a grain of salt.
Wow, so here we have an official representative of our government or our military saying that this was just a big joke. This was
Exactly. Yeah, a practical joke. Yeah, that they put it together, you know, um, back there in Washington, and that it got out of hand. So
Did he mention anything about the Antietam that Fred Tracy was on?
no, like I said, Fred Tracy. It's sad that Fred Tracy hasn't had more of more visibility because he played as just as important part as Carl Allen did and Morris Jessup. I mean, Fred Tracy needs to be there because he was able to validate and authenticate a number of this stuff. The things that certainly with the degaussing experiment. I mean, we know that it did happen, and not only from Fred Tracy, but he sort of validated the fact that yes, the government was experimenting with this degaussing procedure. Because it was important to do that, and Fred Tracy was a part of that. The more interesting thing, though, is the letter, the directive from Admiral Forrestal that that added much to this, and then the unfortunate suicide of Admiral Forrestal. Again, it just makes you wonder. We've lost a number of people, that were connected to the Philadelphia experiment.
When you were doing your research, did you ever feel like you were getting too close to something, or did you ever feel that danger that something could happen?
I didn't feel that at the time. In retrospect, I'm thinking that maybe there might have been a possibility. There might have been some concern there, or there should have been some concern. But no, I was just caught up into it. And again, with my research, I would read every single thing I could. I would try to make sense of it. And certainly back in during the World War II with Einstein and Tesla and Oppenheimer and Enrico Fermi. I mean, when you take a look at some of the things that they were doing, some of the experiments, I mean, it's just like amazing stuff. And for example, and I'm sure your listeners, I haven't seen Oppenheimer, but I don't know if they talked about this, but Enrico Fermi was part of this Manhattan Project, and he was in Chicago. He had a laboratory underneath the University of Chicago. It was underneath the gymnasium. So they had these logs with plutonium rods. And what they would do is they would insert the plutonium rods gently to try to cause a nuclear reaction and then pull them out. They just want to see if they could do it. So this was happening in Chicago as Oppenheimer and his people and everybody else was working on different components of the atomic bomb. So just amazing. And and with Enrico Fermi and Oppenheimer, they're famous individuals, but they have been reintroduced to the public now from the movie Oppenheimer. At least Oppenheimer has been. So, prior to that, he was only known to maybe a select few who followed things like this. Now all of a sudden he's back in the limelight, you know, for all of the things he did. And what was interesting too, again, I haven't seen the motion picture, but Oppenheimer, his security clearance was taken away, and he was banned because he was a member, I believe the Communist Party or the Socialist, which isn't as bad as it sounds. I mean, it's just like it was a very sort of like a liberal, progressive thing that a lot of people did. So, I mean, it wasn't that he was a bad guy spying on us for the Soviets. It wasn't that at all. But he just might have been a member of that group, and because of that, he paid the price. And then later on, I forget which president reinstated him, after the fact. So, but Oppenheimer and played a part in this, just as did Einstein and Tesla, and Morris Jessup. I mean, just a whole bunch of scientists and physicists who were trying to figure this out, and just amazing what they did. I mean, the 1940s. I mean, the things that they did. So did they invent something by mistake that could actually teleport people or induce time travel? Well, maybe theoretically, it's possible, and maybe they did. I just think that Al Bielak was the wrong messenger. I mean, don't kill the messenger, but I mean, we could have used another example too, and this is totally off the thing, but Jack Kevorkian was the guy that was promoting euthanasia, mercy killing, and he was the wrong guy for the job. I mean, he just looked like a ghoul, and just for that topic, we needed somebody else. I'm just saying that Al Bielak was the wrong guy to spread the message of the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project and everything, and time travel. I don't know. I don't know how other people view him, but I don't view him as being very credible.
Do you think that there was an aspect of these degaussing experiments that led to time travel in maybe in the Antietam or other ships?
Yeah, I do. I think that what happened in 1943 in Philadelphia, it was an actual experiment that went wrong. It went sideways, and I think some nasty things happened, and the government immediately covered it up. You know, we've heard about, for example, out in Montana and Wyoming. The government has killed thousands of head of cattle and sheep, with their poison gas, their experiments out there. So we know that. We don't know about uh, uh, the cattle mutilations, if that's government, black ops doing that, or somebody else. But there's things that they do that then they cover it up and don't tell us. So again, the thing about nuking all of those sheep out uh, in the Midwest and the Northwest, they admitted to that, but I don't think they've ever admitted anything about the cattle mutilations. But the government does things, and they have billions and billions and trillions of dollars to do experimentations. And when you talk about the Montauk Project and time travel and mind projection and all this and mind control, I mean, the government has the money to do that. They have the experts to do that, and they have these clandestine groups that we don't even know about that are being funded, with these black monies. And so a lot of this is just conjecture. But just to answer your question, I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but yeah, I believe that that time travel and teleportation are possible. And even back in the 40s, given with what the technology was back then.
Hmm. Well, going back to Fred Tracy, when, because obviously he was not on board the Eldridge, but he was
No,
on board the Antietam. Did
right.
did Fred Tracy ever talk about these time travel concepts?
He didn't talk about time travel. He talked about degaussing. He talked about the physical effects of that, and the from being bombarded with massive amounts of of energy. So he did talk about the Gaussing experiment, but he did believe that what happened with the Eldridge was true. He believed that the ship actually was teleported from Philly to Norfolk and back, and we did talk about that. Um, the only information that he or documentation was the decree from Admiral Forrestal that uh, he talked about and he read.
Okay.
And
Are there any surviving members of not just the Eldridge but also the Antietam?
Yeah, there are. Now the story with the Eldridge. Fred Tracy claimed that they changed the name of the Eldridge to the Wiki Wachi. They changed the logbooks. He claims that they took it out to Arizona and they blew it up with what is it, C4, explosives, and then buried it. So that's what he said. The government said no, that they took and the Eldridge and they sold it to Greece, where it was renamed to Leon, and then it was eventually just decommissioned. And let me see, I think I have the date for that. It was differing. Okay, so here's in my one narrative. There are differing accounts of how the story ended. The USS Eldridge had been used to escort men and materials to North Africa and Southern Europe. In 1951, the Eldridge was transferred to the Royal Hellenic Navy and then to Greece, renamed the HS Leon, and 42 years later it was sold for scrap, seemingly unfitting to such a legendary vessel. But Tracy's recollection was more bizarre. He said that there was a closed session with the Congress in '49, and they decided to get rid of the ship, to destroy it. And so they took it out to Arizona, and they used C4 to destroy the ship and then bury it. So this is, again, and that's not unusual that you would have two conflicting stories, especially when it concerns the government and government possible. I don't want to say possible, alleged government cover up. So yeah,
Well,
certainly.
how did Fred Tracy know about this? I mean, was he part of those meetings, or what was his position?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. He uh, claimed that he knew about the. It seemed to me that maybe it was almost widespread knowledge with some of the sailors. I'm not exactly sure, but he claimed that there was uh, a closed door session on the Philadelphia incident in 1949, and then Congress ordered that they get rid of all, that they cover up all the information, get rid of the ship. So that was his information, and I wish I could go back there and say, Fred, how did you know this? But there was so much information. I mean, I was just like inundated with information, with letters, with documentation, with all this stuff that I still have in one of my files. Like all of the stuff from Fred Tracy, just like which was there's probably a book there. So
All right. So you mentioned that there are other surviving members. Did Fred Tracy give you any names or point you in the direction to get in touch with those people?
well, the people on, again with the Eldridge, the government is saying that this wasn't true, that the Eldridge wasn't in Philadelphia at that time, and this, I mean, they have a totally different timeline, so they disavow all of that. With the Antietam, um, the there were people, I believe, that were contacted, and I don't think that they were able to corroborate Fred Tracy's story. So uh, I don't know. I'm looking for I have information on on the follow up to that. So I don't have that here, but um, so I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. But you did reach out to them or you didn't?
I believe I believe there were a number of people from the Antietam, and I don't believe they were able to validate what Fred said.
Okay. When you mean that they didn't validate what he said, meaning they just didn't know who Fred Tracy was, or they didn't like what do you mean by it? They
Well,
couldn't.
they might not have been. I don't know. I don't know if they were just not privy to that, or it didn't impact on them, or not. I mean, I think that would have been a significant thing. Fred said that the crew members were called together and the document from Admiral Forrestal was read to them. So they should have known about that. But I don't know. I don't know. Um, what the other crew members thought of this. Um, again, I don't know. I don't know what
Okay.
what they would say about it.
All right, that's fine. So, and to anyone listening right now, if you have any information or any relatives who were connected to the USS Eldridge or the USS Antietam, please, please get in touch with Maxim Furek. You can reach him on his website. It's maximfurek.com, and I'll put links to this in the show notes. But any pieces of information is just helpful in kind of piecing together these mysteries, because as time passes, a lot of these people who were involved are going to pass away, and we need to kind of get that story out. Just like, I bring up the Roswell incident, right? Everyone knows what the Roswell incident was. Well, a lot of those firsthand witnesses have passed away. And now we have secondhand, thirdhand stories. And as a researcher, the more you have those types of accounts where it's not direct accounts, the more the details get lost.
Exactly. Exactly.
When your brother originally mentioned Fred Tracy, you said that they were in the military together, right? Jim was in the military.
My cousin Jim,
Oh, your cousin.
who
I'm
was a
sorry.
medic, and Jim at the time was living in Derry, New Hampshire, and knew Fred, through military, I guess, organizations or whatever. And he told me about Fred, and the story was just amazing. So, like I said, when Jim was there, Jim called him up and said, "Fred, I have somebody I want to introduce you to." So I remember talking to him. I was at Jim's place here in Pennsylvania, and then we talked, and then I got his number, and then we chatted some more several times, and then I decided to go up there. So I remember I spent a weekend there, and I took pictures, and I have a picture of Fred in co-region Hoodoo, and I have all of my other documents and photos in another location. They're not here in Pennsylvania, but I need to get to those. And yes, I will go and archive those and do my best to get you a copy as well.
You had mentioned the Montauk experiment.
Yeah.
This often intersects with the discussions about the Philadelphia experiment. How are these two narratives connected? And do you think there's any credibility to the Montauk experiments?
Well, the like I said, the Philadelphia experiment is something that makes sense to me. The Philadelphia experiment, and then we started to hear about the Montauk, and we started to hear about Dulce, the Dulce Wars in New Mexico. So these happened after the Philadelphia experiment. Al Bielak was pretty much the one that was talking about the Montauk project. He claimed that after he went into the future, came back to the Eldridge, and then he was put in charge of this Montauk experiment. He was the director or something. But that Montauk project, it took allegedly. We started to hear about this in the 80s, but it alleges that there was a series of government projects at the Montauk Air Force Station in New York. It was called Camp Hero. And it was a place where they would develop psychological warfare techniques and do exotic research, including time travel. So that's where Al Bielak comes in. I mean, Bielak claimed that he was transported from the Eldridge, to the future, and then from the Eldridge to Montauk. So he claimed that that happened, and uh, that was one thing. The other thing then was his friend Phil Schneider, and Phil Schneider was invited to do a series of conferences with Al Bielak. And Phil Schneider was the one that talked about. He claimed that he was an explosive engineer that worked for the government. Schneider said that he had a high level security clearance, and he said that he helped build the secret underground base in Dulce. Now this is around 1995. So Montauk in the 80s, Dulce in the 90s. And again, we're seeing other theories after the Philadelphia experiment. And Schneider was, after he started to do his conferences, his lectures, and he was saying that there's a new world order. He said the new world order is connected with extraterrestrials. He said that he wanted the government to be more transparent about what they know about alien life, just as what we're hearing here in 2023. But he also believed that people in the government were trying to shut him down. 6 months after that, and he told his friends and family that if he committed suicide, it would be murder, not suicide. 6 months later, he was found dead. He was in his apartment, and he was killed military style. Piano wire was wrapped around his neck, and he was killed that way. So this was Phil Schneider. Again, too bizarre. I don't know how close he came to the truth, but I'm just wondering if some of these things like the Montauk Project aren't just let out just as a type of government disinformation to make people head in that direction and say, well, wait a second, I could buy psychological warfare and experiments like that, but I don't know about time travel. So there's always something of the bizarre with these things. But the Montauk thing was pretty much the one that was promoted by Al Bielak, and the Dulce Wars, they called them, the alien human battle in Dulce. According to Phil Schneider, there was a battle going on in I guess it was 1979, and there was something like 60 of our Delta forces that were killed, and there were they call them extraterrestrial biological entities. Some of those were killed, and just a really bizarre story. He claims, Phil Schneider claimed that there's underground military installations. They were called DUMBs, DUMBS. And he said that there's, hundreds of them in the United States. They cost billions of dollars, but they're with the black budget. This is funding that, it's hard to find out who gets this money because it's layers and layers of other departments and everything. So he claimed that he was part of building these underground military installations and deep underground military installations, or DUMBS. So that was his narratives. That was his story. But, he was killed. His good friend Ron Rummel, who's published Alien Digest, he committed suicide, and Schneider believed that he was murdered. And then another one was Dr. Carla Turner, who died of this unidentifiable cancer. She was in perfect health, had no genetic history of cancer, but she was another one that was involved in what she called she was focusing on alien military and paramilitary abductions, or MAR, the Malevolent Alien Abduction Research. And she was killed. So there was just a number of people that either committed suicide or were murdered who were part of these things, especially the Dulce thing in New Mexico. So I don't know what to make of it, but this whole thing about Dulce and about Phil Schneider, it reads like a crime thriller, and you have villains and blood splatters and dead bodies. I mean, it's just an actual thing. So again, Phil Schneider and Al Bielak were connected. Belak was doing these programs in the '90s, around '95, I believe, and Phil Schneider went along with him. So they are notorious in ufology. Their stories are bizarre. They're unsubstantiated, but yet there may be, we do know that there's with the Cold War, we built underground military installations. So the fact that Phil Schneider said that he worked on some of them, is probably true. And were there aliens down there? Well, he claimed that there was something called, this got even more bizarre, but Phil Schneider claimed there was a thing called the Greada Treaty, and this is a treaty between the Earth, between us Earthlings and the extraterrestrial. That was a trade-off, and so we were living peacefully. They were sharing their technology with us, and we were giving them safety. And then at some point, something happened, and a war went on, and like Schneider said, 60 men were killed. So,
Right. Yeah. Phil Schneider's talks are out there on YouTube. You can
yeah,
listen to it for yourself. You can watch his presentation. And he lost some fingers
yeah,
apparently in these firefights with these
yeah,
otherworldly entities.
exactly, yeah. Some kind of a laser beam, he said. The alien hit him with a laser beam, some kind of laser plasma beam, he called it.
Right. Now, let me ask you, Maxim, like, do you think there is any credibility to Phil Schneider's claims?
I think I have to think that I think Al Bielek and maybe even Phil Schneider might have been part of. And again, this is my own opinion, and I'm still thinking it through. But I think they might have been part of a government disinformation campaign. And I think the Philadelphia experiment came closer to the truth than Montauk or Dulce, but I think that they were part of a disinformation campaign that was about extraterrestrials and aliens and time travel and all the rest. So I just think that whenever we get close to the truth, we get these stories, these narratives that are really bizarre and off the charts. And I think that's the part I believe that Phil Schneider and I really believe that Al Bielak was part of that too. I mean, Al Bielak's stories, like Al Bielak's, it's like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I mean, Al Bielak. I mean, being time traveled, 100 years into the future, and then back to the Eldridge, and then back to Montauk, and all that. I mean, that's just. I mean, it's not even for me. It's hard to get my arms around it. With Schneider's is I think more believable. I think there are we know there are underground caverns there. There was a French um, uh, uh, article. It was in 1999. The French government published a study. They concluded that the United States government has withheld evidence pointing to UFOs' existence. It was called UFOs and Defense: What Must We Be Prepared For? And they talked about these underground facilities and what we know. I mean, we're the top dog there as far as the free world. I mean, we have more military might and we have more resources. So I think there's something to Phil Schneider's story that that resonates. With authenticity. Al Bielak again, I think is suspect. I would have loved to have been at the conference with the two of them, though. That had to be just a great time.
Yeah, and to anyone listening, if you were at that conference, can you please get in touch with me? I would love to hear your take on it. If you heard from Phil Schneider firsthand, if you're present in the audience, because we
Yeah,
see these grainy videos on YouTube of Phil Schneider giving his talk, right? But we don't hear about people who were present for that
yeah,
talk. And I'm sure that there's more to this story. All right, so let's back up a little bit because you brought up disinformation. We know that there are active disinformation agents working to muddy the waters. and disseminate false information to researchers into the Philadelphia experiment and the UFO topic, and many others. Just to give the listeners a few examples, we know about Richard Doty, who worked for the AFOSI, feeding disinformation to Paul Benowitz and Linda Moulton Howe.
Paul Benowitz, right?
Yep. And so Paul Benowitz was a researcher who was, he came across some interesting signals coming out of Kirtland Air Force Base and was filming strange lights and these unusual radio signals. So he contacted Kirtland, and he was trying to share his findings. And in an attempt to kind of quiet him, they fed him this BS story that he was picking up on UFOs. And they told him that, hey, we're going to help you. Well, then we have William Moore.
Yep. Okay.
And he admitted at a MUFON conference in, I think it was 1989, that he was feeding junk to UFO researchers. And he was part of and was engaged with these disinformation activities against Paul Benowitz.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I bring in William Moore's name up is because William Moore wrote the Philadelphia experiment with Charles Berlitz that you brought up earlier. So he also wrote the Roswell incident with Berlitz. It makes me wonder if some of these legendary stories that circulate in the community, if they didn't originate in a fictitious realm because of, these disinformation agents and their associations to these stories. So, I mean, what do you make of it? I mean, do you think we're being fed something that is not entirely accurate?
Yeah. Well, I think there's at least two theories here, two possibilities. One, that Philadelphia experiment and Roswell was disinformation that was fed to William Moore and Berlitz, and to the UFO community. So that's one possibility. The other one, though, is I think that maybe they got a little bit too close to the truth, and the government decided to use them as operatives. So what they did was they fed them additional disinformation. So by admitting that they were doing this disinformation, it's sort of, the rest of us will take another look at the Philadelphia experiment and Roswell and MJ12 and all the other things and just question that. So I think this disinformation campaign has worked because we're just, scratching our heads and just wondering what's true and what's not. And but I think that Moore somehow got caught, and my other theory was this, that he somehow got caught and he used this disinformation thing as a way to get out of it. I think he might have made up some stuff. I thought that maybe he was a legitimate researcher, but might have fudged some data, made up some stuff. And then when he was caught, I believe he might have used as an excuse that he was being used as a government operative and he was feeding, the world this disinformation. So that is the third possibility, that after he was caught, he was using that information. So again, we don't know, but there's there's plenty of room for conjecture and for theories, and we don't know. But again, but looking at Philadelphia experiment and looking at Roswell, something happened there. Something happened there. Certainly in 1947, when that thing came down, it wasn't a weather balloon, and we were out in Roswell. I talked to Walter Hout. He was the press, the guy who released the press report, for the Roswell Air Force Base. And then they changed it, I think the same day, because it went out, and then the Air Force is saying that this isn't going to fly. So they changed it up and said that it was just a weather balloon. And they had, I think, Jesse Marcel come and pose, with that stupid looking expression, well, it wasn't a weather balloon. And then look at the whole series of Roswell. I mean, then it was Project Mogul, and then it was Project Skyhook. I mean, there's just lie after lie after lie, cover up after cover up after cover up. I mean, I don't know. I don't believe what they're telling us. And you can't tell me that technology that they used in 1947, allegedly to detect if the Soviets were conducting nuclear explosions, underground. I mean, so what? That is, technology from 1947. We have advanced, a million times over. We have better, faster, more sophisticated technology than we had back then. There's nothing, I don't think, that needs to be covered up or classified in any way, with Project Mogul or Skyhook or any of those other things. So again, um, the main theme tonight, I mean, it seems to be government disinformation and government cover up. I mean, the government is a key player in all this, and we just don't know to what extent.
How has the broader UFO and paranormal communities responded to your research and your writings on the Philadelphia experiment? Have you encountered any surprising or unexpected reactions?
I'm getting a couple things. One, I'm getting invited to Bigfoot expos, and I mean, I have a couple of chapters on Bigfoot in Co-Region Hoodoo, but my real passion, I think, is in aspects of the paranormal and also ufology. And again, I'm like everybody else. I just want to find out what it is, and with the flying saucer esoteric that should be coming out the end of September or early October. I have some interesting things there that we could talk about. But no, it's the book's been well received. You know, somebody called me the John Keel. I mean. I don't know if that was a compliment, but Keel talked about a lot of bizarre things. When you look for explanations, like, are there entities that are just fooling with us, messing with us, playing, tricksters, like the what's the Indian, the Native American trickster out there, Kokiopeli, that just plays tricks on people. And but I don't know. I mean, we these entities that we may be sharing space with, they don't seem to be evil and malevolent. We just don't know what they are. And but July 26, 2023, that's when we had those congressional hearings, and Grush said that he knows where the bodies are and he knows where the crash sites are, and we're just waiting to find out where they are. He claimed that he shared that information with the government. So, we're looking for that. We'd like to find out as well. So, a lot of things happening now. Like, if you're a whistleblower, you have protection. They're asking people to come forward if they see things. Don't be afraid of retribution. Don't be afraid of being embarrassed or castigated. If you've seen something, we want to know about it. So it seems that the government is being more forthcoming now than they have been. So we'll wait and see. But I mean, we're waiting for the next act. You know, uh, the congressional hearings on July 26th were telling. I mean, I was at WVIA Studios being interviewed by Erica Funke that same day. So I was just like, couldn't wait to get back home and watch some of that that we taped. So. But anyway, that's just crazy important news, and we're waiting to find out what's the next thing that's going to come from that. So
You've been invited to the upcoming Bigfoot and Cryptic Supernatural Expo. Could you give us a little preview of what attendees can expect from your presentation at this event?
yeah, it's going to be in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and that's in Cambria County. That's real close to what's called the Chestnut Ridge. That's a 4 or 5 county area south east of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, where we've seen the most Bigfoot sightings and also Bigfoot in conjunction with UFOs. So I'm going to be talking about that connection, what and I believe that Bigfoot and UFOs or UAPs share a lot of commonality. So I'm going to be talking about that. But one thing of interest is that I'm getting so much exposure in Western Pennsylvania. We've had feature articles written in Butler County, where Night of the Living Dead was filmed, in Fayette County, Cambria County. The Pittsburgh Post Gazette is, I believe, is going to do something. So it's just been great, to get this exposure in Western Pennsylvania, the sort of the epicenter of, Bigfoot and country. And last year we had a chance to go out to the Kecksburg UFO Festival and hang out with Stan Gordon, and then go up to Evans City and meet the mayor of Evans City, where they shot Night of the Living Dead. So he offered to remarry me and my wife Pat in the chapel. So
Oh, that's so cool.
anyway, yeah, but it was pretty cool. So Pennsylvania is just an epicenter of weirdness, and Coleridge and Hoodoo tells that story. I mean, I take a look at, it's Pennsylvania centric. Uh, the Night of the Living Dead, The Blob, and the Philadelphia Experiment are motion pictures that are, our own, creations. They come from our Commonwealth, and so the book Coleridge and Hoodoo is just doing so well and has been so. And thanks for the question. It's been very, very well received, and I probably could have made two books out of it, because it cast a wide net. But I'm glad I did what I did. I mean, it's just, I mean, I really, I'm proud of the book. It has over 400 references to books, magazine articles, and personal interviews, and I think it reads well. So I'm pleased with Hoodoo, and then Flying Saucer Esoterics coming out. So when
Yeah.
that, yeah, that's pretty amazing, because when that gets published, that'll be two books that will have had published in 2023. So I'm, sort of excited.
Yeah,
Pretty
let's get into this. Tell us about this latest book. It's called The Flying Saucer Esoteric: History's Most Amazing UFO Events.
right. And what I do is I take a look at, the whole thing about flying saucers, and I start with BC, before Christ. I start with individuals, theologians and astronomers, who believed that there was life on other planets. And some of these were viewed as heretics, and they were put to death because they went against church and state. Back in the day, the church believed that everything revolved around the sun. That was like ordained. And when Copernicus and all these other people start to say, no, wait a second, we're going around, a lot of the things that they were saying was going against, what the church believed. So they were viewed as heretics. But I take a look at the folks before Christ, and then I look at biblical scripture that a lot of people like Eric von Daniken uh, uh, and Morris Jessup, so many people believed was proof that aliens came down here and interbred with humans, and then helped create things like the pyramids and Easter Island and all the other things. So I talk about some of those specific scriptures, and then I get into the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries, and I talk about Copernicus and Galileo. I talk about Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and just all of this stuff. The Shaver mystery, the Fort's Book of the Damned, the wormhole theory. So it's Adamski's Wild Ride. So I talk about contactees, abductees, hoaxers, and scientists, and planetary explorers. So it's a book that takes a look at all of this. It's almost like not a listing or a compilation, but it's almost like a time travel, like a time machine. And I'm hoping, I think it's going to be, it's coming out at the right time. And what it is, I mean, you could open it up to 1947 and look at Roswell, and take a look at what happened immediately before Roswell. Was there any activity? Was there anything going on as far as UFOs? And then look at it after. So it's just a great way to go and take a look at this what I call like a time machine. So yeah, the Flying Saucer Esoteric, and I'm hoping to be working on the cover, real soon, because they want this book out by the end of September or early October. So,
Oh, wow.
you know,
Okay.
yeah. So it's come along fast, but
Well, let me ask you this. Will your personal encounter be in there?
well, my personal counter, yeah, I talk about that. I was in the Navy. I was a radarman aboard the USS Constellation, and I have seen numerous flying saucers. I mean, UFOs that were faster and more maneuverable than anything we had or the other side had. So we don't know what they are, but they could have been extraterrestrial, or they could have been these anomalies. Uh, Temperature inversions, whatever. There could be these anomalies that we don't know anything about. We don't know, but we saw them and we put them in the logbooks. And just like with Fred Tracy and some of his buddies aboard the Antietam, I don't know what they were told, but they were told. Fred Tracy says that they were told that they would be severely reprimanded if they acknowledged any of this information that they received from Admiral Forrestal. With us, a lot of us were just kids. We were like under 20 years of age, serving aboard this constellation, and we were told to keep our mouth shut. We didn't see anything. Those logbooks where we would write down the range and bearing of all these UFOs, those logbooks would disappear the next day and they would be replaced with brand new books. But, I would go through some of these logbooks and see all the UFO sightings. So they were, we saw them all the time. And the same thing's happening now. I mean, nothing has changed. I'll tell you what, I was watching Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I think it was 1956. I was watching that on YouTube a couple of nights ago. And a lot of these early 50s black and white science fiction movies would have this professor, this expert who would talk about flying saucers. Well, this guy that's talking said that 3% of the things that we see we can identify. And that was the same thing that the Pentagon was saying back in 2020, that there's things out there, they're either ours, theirs, or they're extraterrestrial. 3% of them we don't know. We have no idea what they are. So things haven't changed. And when I was watching Earth versus the Flying Saucer, I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. That fits into the narrative. So
Interesting. Um, and if you can't talk about this, just let me know. But when you were on board the USS Constellation, whereabouts did you see these anomalous objects?
yeah, pretty well. Here's what we did. We were our tour duty. It was called Westpac, Western Pacific. So I was 17, 18 years old. Hawaii, Hong Kong, Philippines, Japan, and Gulf of Tonkin. So that's where we went. That's where we watched the scope. So any place between Hawaii, Hong Kong, Philippines, Japan, and the war zone, the Gulf of Tonkin, we saw those. We saw them all the time. We saw them, probably every day. We saw UFOs. Again, faster and more maneuverable than any guided missile that we had or that the other side had. Just faster. They would make these turns with just terrific G-force that humans couldn't withstand. So, I don't know. Nobody knows. But even with in San Diego, that Tic Tac thing that everybody, that they're talking about, the Navy pilots followed it, went uh, under it. It went on top of them. It followed them for a while. It tracked, and then it took off. So, not a meteorite or an asteroid or anything else. It was something that seemed to have had been directed, by some kind of intelligence. So it wasn't some kind of a mirage or some kind of it just it was maneuverable.
Right. And,
So
and what was the time frame that you were stationed aboard this?
that was around 67 and 68.
Okay. Did you ever do any research to find out if there were any other? I mean, what you said earlier was that you guys were told to shut up,
Yeah, right.
and
Yeah.
then the logbooks were removed.
Yeah.
Did you do any research and find out if there were any other people who have come forward and talked about similar experiences?
Well, I've talked to my shipmates, and I still keep in touch with a bunch of them, and yeah, they say the same thing. It was the same thing. Don't talk about it. But back then, before this wave of nonconformity and protest and rebellion hit, and that hit pretty good in the United States with a lot of us. Before that, though, we were pretty law abiding, and we would go and follow those directives. So when they said keep your mouth shut and don't tell anybody about it, we pretty much did that. But in retrospect, I mean, looking back, I mean, I've talked to a bunch of my Navy buddies that I'm still in contact with, and then they say the same thing. I mean, what I'm saying, that don't talk about it, and we saw that. So
Maxim Furek, he's got a new book coming out. He has one already out. It's called Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. And you can get that from his website, maximfurek.com. That's MAXIMFUREK.com. maximfurek.com. It's always a pleasure talking with you, friend. So thanks again.
Yeah, and thank you. And again, thank you for keeping the memory of the Philadelphia experiment alive. And, it's just a great story, and more people need to know about it. And, those motion pictures that were created, they totally went off script. So, didn't follow the story at all. But, they're interesting and they're fun to watch. But, yeah, thank you so much. And again, if any of your listeners are interested, the newest book is Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. So, yeah, thanks so much. I really enjoyed having our chat.
Of course. We'll have to have you back for another episode. All right.
Absolutely.
Take care, my friend.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
You have been listening to Terror Signals with Justin Bamforth and presented by Normal Paranormal. For more on this show and other topics of high strangeness, please visit normalparanormal.org or visit the program website at terrorsignals.com.